10-minute sign. Actually, would probably be better. So thank you very much for coming to spend some time. We're hoping to go through what we have to say very quickly, and then actually hang out with you and talk about strategies for mobile apps and learn from you and just have a nice discussion. So today's session, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the social and cultural issues surrounding how we are approaching an app from the University of Toronto, and Peter is going to talk you through some of the technical approaches with that, and then if possible, it should work. It looks like it works. We actually will bring the app. You, of course, are welcome to download the app if you'd like. It's available for both Android and iOS at the moment, but we'll fire it up on the screen too and play with it a little bit too. So until fairly recently, we did not have an app, or an official app, I should say. And the question was, why did we not have an app? To cut to the chase, no one could decide who owned it, who would own it, and what should be in it. Might sound familiar to others around the room, similar questions. So, in fact, I go even further and say that couldn't even agree whether or not there should be an app. There's a lot of people who are interested in mobile web, HTML5, responsive design as a way to move forward, and that was an ongoing debate within our community as well. So this was a problem. I'm not here criticizing the technological debate. I understand the pros and cons of each, but we didn't have one. People go looking for it, and of course, other people. Come. It's okay. No, it's not a problem. Yeah. Don't worry. No, seriously. We're all friends here anyway, So we call it the rise of the fakes. I managed to capture 3 and not wipe them off my devices, but we know that there have been others that we managed to get rid of, mostly on the Apple side of things, because of course, when these companies violate our copyright, you use our logos and so on, they are in fact, and I saw Willie is in the room shaking his head from Apple, they are in fact violating their agreement with Apple because it's very explicit that they shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. So it's a rather, we have to write a letter, and Apple has been very kind to take them off as we identify them. What are these companies doing? Well, they're mostly pulling public information. I mean, it's, public RSS events or news information. But then they're slapping advertising that they resell, and so somebody goes and thinks this is an official Uoft app, and it's promoting whatever the company, whatever products they have from their customers. So what did we do? We, like probably everyone else in the room, put together a big working group of people, of stakeholders. So in our case, we had folks from our registrar, central registrar. Student Life is the group at Uoft that deals with from the time somebody is accepted right through to graduation. It really is the contact group for students' experience. They're the ones, for example, who manage the process for student groups and so on. I'm sure, I'm almost positive everyone has a similar kind of group. Strategic communications in our group really is what it sounds like. The public face of the university is managed by that particular group at the University of Toronto. Library, of course, IT folks and students. We went looking for undergrad and graduate students on recommendation, people who could participate. And we sat around and we looked at things and we talked about things and we sort of hashed it out. We looked at others of your schools. You might recognize some names there. This one screenshot. I think in the end, I don't know how many, dozens of apps that we downloaded and got as far as we could get with until an authentication screen came up, just to see what it was doing and just to get a sense of the lay of the land. So it's a little dated now. I would say if we did this process together again, this information would be different because the apps evolved in the last year, year and a half, and so on. But what we noticed was some interesting things. 80% of schools had some really basic stuff like maps, news, events, library, contact directory kind of thing. So that was clearly a common piece. And then sliding down, suggestion box, photo collection, links. What was interesting was not too many apps have a link to a campus mail function, because I guess the assumption is if you're carrying a mobile device, you have some kind of native mail application or something that you've downloaded for yourself, whatever fits in there. So you get a sense of what we were seeing circa maybe a year and a half or so ago, 2 years. But it was very interesting for us to get a sense of that. And of course, that then led to the question, well, could we put any of these things into our app? What is the state of our information systems that would actually pull the feeds? And so, we had to obviously think a little bit about that. But despite all the work and even an agreement that we should have an app because we need to control our space, we couldn't obviously agree on the content. And it's very interesting. I mean, I think the thing that probably represents this conversation the best is an app for students. Is that something you've had that conversation at your schools too, right? Is it student-centric? Is that the focus of an app or something else? Is it a marketing tool? Is it for the wide community? So that really sort of back and forth. Then we had a moment of group epiphany. We were sitting around, and I have to give credit to the University of Texas because I think when we were looking at their app, it sort of sparked a little bit of something. If you haven't downloaded theirs, and now I think a number of schools have it, they have a favorites or a bookmarking function, which lets you pick from a list of RSS feeds. And that adds to their app an extra icon within the app for that particular RSS. So, they have whatever it is, a dozen or so different RSS feeds, but they don't force it on the person who has the app. You choose from it and you pick it, and it's sort of an extra little favorite kind of thing. So I give them that, and this was what we said in the working group. Why put any content in the app at all? Why don't we let the end users decide? Why don't we let the content providers provide? And then, of course, why don't we, ultimately the question was, why don't we actually leverage the culture of the mobile devices? One of the questions, this is my phone. It's an iPhone. Probably a lot of you have them too. I'm willing to bet any of you that my iPhone is not set up the same way as anyone else in the room, okay? We may have some of the same apps, but how I've organized my apps, I'm sure, and of course the ones I've extra downloaded, is that a reasonable bet? Nobody's going to take me on that one, right? Okay. Why not do the same thing inside an app for the university? Why don't we try that and see what happens and let the internal providers do that? And, there was a little bit of pushback, no, we should have some things, they won't know what to do. And the argument became, of course they know what to do because they're all using the mobile devices, whether or not it's the iOS or Android or whatever. We all have them, we understand. You go, you get additional apps, you put them, you organize them, and so on. So it was an interesting conversation, but in the end, I think it was sort of an aha moment. And so that's how we started our journey to create a mega app with micro apps through an in-app app store. And I put it in quotes because I realize App Store belongs to Apple, but you get the idea. And with the goal that if we could do this, each person who downloads the app would customize it within the context of what was available within the in-app app store. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Peter.
Thanks. And so I would like to spend a few minutes to talk about the technical side of the app, and just going over it fairly quickly. This is the first prototype of our app, and as you can see, it's very minimal. There's some buttons on the left-hand side, and then there's a preference screen on the right-hand side. And in fact, the preference screen is already scrapped, and we don't really want to do a campus-specific view. Just to show you the buttons, they are generic jQuery mobile buttons, and they have labels on top, and then there's a little star icon there. The technical architecture for the mobile app is built on PhoneGap. A lot of people probably know PhoneGap. Can I see a raise of hand who considered using PhoneGap? jQuery mobile, jQuery mobile, awesome. So this might be a little bit foreign to you. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. I hope I'm not scaring you. At the bottom there's Android or iOS web view, which PhoneGap is based on to build the experience on top. PhoneGap is also known as Cordova on the public side. jQuery is a JavaScript library that works on top of PhoneGap that provides all the functionality with jQuery mobile, and then on top of jQuery mobile, there's jQuery UI and other libraries. And then right on top of this, HTML5. It looks like a lot of stack in there, but it's actually pretty simple. jQuery provides you with the events, listeners, the Ajax, storage, storm. DOM stands for document object model, and jQuery mobile gives you the transition of the interface. So it gives you the fade in, fade out, the transition, slide in, slide out effects, page components, such as the header, the content, and then the footer section at the bottom. List views. If you're familiar with mobile development, list view is essential in anywhere. You can't live without it. Dialog box pops up in the middle of the screen. You can click on the cross to close it. And then basic theming, color schemes. University of Toronto is big on blue, so we use a lot of blue on our app. jQuery UI is for drag and drop, and then sortable. Sortable means you can sort your icons on the screen, and then there are some bounce effects. I'll show you in the demo in a little bit later. So this is the home page on an iPhone. As you can see, there's the banner at the top, the header. The area in the middle is the content, and then there's the footer at the bottom for a plus sign, and then a settings icon. You probably, some of you have downloaded the app now and is playing with it. Actually, the middle part there, the content area, is actually divided into an icon grid defined by jQuery mobile. And the technical term is UI -grid-C, which means it's going to separate into 4 columns. And it works beautiful because it works with something called draggable. So as you can see, there's a draggable there. So this entire cell grid is defined as a draggable cell. So you can actually tap on it and start dragging the cell around. And then there's the little blue icon there, which is defined as just a button, just a typical jQuery mobile button, customized with round corners and blue background and then a white icon on top. I'm not gonna go through this because it's too technical. So, okay, so what does our app actually do? There are 5 things that this app can actually do. Number 1 is to call another app within the device. I'll demonstrate what that means. Number 2 is to call a browser called child browser. Some of you might be familiar. So brings in a browser and display a web page within the app. Number 3 is to scrape a web page and then present the content into the jQuery mobile page. And then number 4 is to present structured data such as RSS or call an Ajax data store and brings in some data. Number 5 is to create a custom micro app. Just do whatever you want within that jQuery mobile framework, or a combination of the above. I know some of you are typing here, so I'm going to give you a second here.
I mean, we'll share the
It says confidential before the meeting, before our presentation, but it's not anymore.
template, you know, template.
Okay, so Avi's going to say something.
So I come close because of the folks at the remote here. So, you know, we do recognize, of course, that sometimes there is the need for a standalone app independent of sort of this generic university app. And so, part of the mission, as Peter just mentioned, was to be able for this app to call another app in the same way that if you're browsing the web off of your mobile device and there's a link and it takes you to YouTube, for example, it'll start up the YouTube app. Or if you're in your email and you have a link to a website and a URL, it'll start up your browser app. And, it's one app launches the other. So we spent a bit of time figuring out how we could do that. And an example for us would be we have our LMS has its own app that we get from the vendor, and it has all kinds of functionality that just wouldn't make any sense for us to try and reproduce. But we'd like to have a link, if you like, from within the within our app to that. It made sense. There seemed to be some demand. So figuring out a little bit how to get our app to launch another app, if we identified that other app, was an important consideration. It also meant culturally that if a unit on campus was invested in creating their own app or already had, we could put a link to it if that was the way they wanted to approach it, rather than some of the other methods.
Thanks, Avi. So the technical side of calling another app, which we call is the Blackboard Mobile Learn app, BBML. And on the Android side, we use something called an intent. And an intent is basically Android's version of giving a command into the device and do something. So there's a custom web intent JavaScript library that allows us to create this prototype.launch app method. And we use that to launch the com.blackboard.android. And it just fires up Blackboard Mobile Learn very easily. iOS use a different scheme. It's called URI scheme. And it's basically just a hyperlink with an href tag with that string. And it will launch Blackboard Mobile Learn. If you want the string, I can give it to you.
So just the string, though, is dependent on what the app is that you want to.
Yes. So this string can't call every app. So this is specific to Blackboard Mobile Learn. Another way to present content is to scrape web content on a website. This took me a while to figure out. It's not really hard, but it's just time consuming. So the technical note here is you always should convert relative links into absolute links. And then you have to manipulate some whitelist. That means PhoneGap originally blocks all the internet access until you actually give them a domain that you whitelist them. But even if you whitelist the domain, Android and iOS handles those separately. And this link gives you an overview of what that means. On top of that, you have to sort of handle them separately. You have to watch out for Android, you have to watch out for iOS. I'm sorry, I can't go into too much technical detail, but it's very useful to know. Custom micro apps.
So as we were saying about existing apps, we wanted to also provide units with the opportunity to create a real native app-like experience within the larger app, the university app, rather than just pulling an RSS feed or launching a web page within the app, which were obviously the fastest and most common ways for us to pull content in to the university's app from an existing source. So in particular, the interest here was really about the student information system integration and having functionality that really felt like a native app built in. Rather than a standalone app, it is built in. So the first one that comes with the app is something called Course Finder, which is a query system that our SIS folks built to look at the course catalog. It's not defined. By the way, we haven't put any authentication piece on the general app. We leave that for the time being to the content owner. So if somebody wants authenticated functionality, then you jump off to whatever their website or their app or whatever the case may be. It just seemed faster for us to be able to sort of test out this methodology, and then we'll revisit having some authentication layer at the general app level. But SIS in this particular case is really querying the course catalog, but it's doing so without authentication. So it's open to the public looking for course information at U of T. Did you want to say something about the technology, how that worked for a second?
For Course Finder? Yeah, Course Finder is based on an existing web app. If you go to coursefinder.utoronto.ca, you will see the web application. They can search for course, students can search for course there. The mobile side is basically replacing that interface onto a mobile device. And I'll have to ask, well, we did ask the database folks to create the RESTful service for us so we can consume. So basically, it's just a handling of a bunch of AJAX query and displaying the list onto the screen. Hope that all that makes sense. This is a slide that I must put in because this basically covers 40% of the development of the entire app. The reason why is because each of these libraries are so important to the app. I'm going to explain a little bit. Child browser, I explained it. Basically, it brings in the web page into the app itself without exiting the app. Fast click is so important because if you're using hybrid app development into any of these platforms, you're going to encounter a 300 millisecond delay, which when you click on anything, it will just delay your click by 300 milliseconds because it wants to detect the double clicking. In order to avoid that, just to have the native seamless experience, just like a native app, you have to put in the fast click library. Unfortunately, fast click library doesn't work very well on the Android side with jQuery UI. And there are 3 lines that you have to take out. If you want to know which 3 lines, you can ask me later. But fast click is so important because the experience is so different without it. On the iOS side, it works perfect without even doing anything. Web intent, I explained it a little bit. It handles the calling on the Android side to call another app into to call externally another app. And underscore is another JavaScript library that is used even on the web development. And it handles mostly for data. When your data comes back and you want to sort it out, you want to handle it, you want to group them in certain ways, you use underscore. Well, we use underscore. You can use other libraries too. U of T Mobile launched, was it 3 weeks ago? I think about 3 weeks ago. And we had 2 issues during launch. And I'm more than happy to share with you what the 2 issues are. On Android 2.3, the JSON.parse method threw me an error. And basically on 2.3, it just doesn't work. And so we had to quickly fix it. And what initially gives us was just an exception. It doesn't even describe what the exception was. But it would be cool to find out JSON.parse doesn't work very well on Android 2.3. Device platform in PhoneGap. So PhoneGap gives you a description. You can ask PhoneGap what is the device that is running on. So we have one of the script there trying to find out which one of these we were trying to detect. iPad's fine, iPhone's fine, iPod's not so much. Nobody runs it on simulator except the developers. The reason why iPod is wrong because I typed in iPod instead of iPod Touch. So, bang. Doesn't work in iPod Touch until I patched it. So next slide shows you the feature upgrade. So we have, after launch, we have some feedback, not a lot, because we basically did a silent launch, and a lot of developers within the campus told us what they would like to see. The students are not so much. So in the future, we would like more student-specific functions. Some of them present, let's say, course timetable. It's one of the highest one. Implement lazy loading. Some of our lists are pretty long. When data comes back, we would like to see the elastic scrolling, and when you scroll down to the bottom, it loads more. If you have seen the screen of our app, it basically has a long. If you put in more icons, it just goes on and on. So we would, in the future, we can do the swiping home screen. BlackBerry 10, Who here think we should do BlackBerry 10 release? One. Okay, just about the same as in a campus survey. But it's definitely a possibility. We already have the Android version of the app, so we are playing with Blackboard to convert that package directly into a BlackBerry 10. And then homepage sortable easing effect. I have to show you what that means so that shows up.
Okay, so we went back after we figured out a plan and had a prototype, and you know, first question I got, shouldn't be a surprise to lots of us in the room. Who's going to decide what gets into the what micro apps get into the mega app? And so we had some discussions about that, and you know, being good IT people, we said, well, you tell us, and we'll do whatever you say. And so it's at U of T, it's our strategic communications folks and student life together. And this is not a committee. It's not by committee. It's the professional decisions of the professional experts responsible for a lot of the public face of the institution decide that. So I think it's a nice partnership because we're able to help units bring their content potentially forward and then bring it to our friends and colleagues in StratCom and Student Life and say, here's some ideas, you know, let us know if you'd like it to be there or not. Obviously, as you know, updates come out, we can add content and so on. One thing I think won't be there in any time soon is student-run, student-generated content. This is, after all, a university official app, and so there will be content for students. Some of that content might be generated by individual students in the employ of the groups who generate content for students, but I don't expect that we will see icons from student groups over which we don't have. And for those of you who watch campus things at U of T, as you recall, for example, a few months ago, a student group planned a very interesting program in downtown Toronto that got a lot of controversy in the national newspapers for it. It had nothing to do with the university, but it was a student project and a student program, and you know, so this is an official app, and as I say, probably not going to see too much in that regard. So we're okay, right? We got to 10 minutes in that range, somewhere in that, right? A little bit less. A little less. Okay, 1 second. My password first before you watch it. Yay. So that's what our app looks like when you download it. Oh, I don't know if there's anything in particular you wanted me. How many folks have downloaded the app while sitting here? Oh, thank you very much.
That's to the number.
How many of you found a bug yet? No. Okay. So it's blank. There's nothing there except, so just a little line. Thanks for downloading it. And push the little plus sign in the corner, and ooh, that's fuzzy. Anyway, it's not as fuzzy on the screen, but anyway, there's our in-app app store, micro apps, and then you just scroll through and you pick some things. So I'm just gonna. Is there any in particular you want to me other than Course Finder? Is here? I'll just do a news thing. U of T magazine. Varsity Blues, map, Course Finder, and you know, a specialized web that we can bring in. Obviously, I'll just pick a sample of that. There we go. There we go. Okay, and there you go. We have a custom. Did I get them all? Okay. So I now have a customized app experience from the things that I wanted. For me, the Twitter feed from UTM, is it jiggling up there? Yeah, it's jiggling. And if I do it right, I should be able to drag it around a little bit.
So the easing effect that I mentioned earlier is when you sort of drag and drag and sort of move them. Whoa. When you drag these buttons around, you see the other ones sort of pop over. The easing effect is supposed to make it smoother. That's all I have to say.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so very quickly, because I do want to chat with you more about it. So if I click on the portal, it launches. Oh, well, I don't have a network connection, but it launches the Blackboard Mobile Learn app. That's our LMS integration, and then I don't know. There's a magazine by one of the content providers. Is it going to work? Because I don't have a network connection because it's pulling it fresh from the network. Oh, is it spinning? Yeah, it's spinning because I didn't connect this to the network, and so on. Well, most of the sources are in fact over the network, but you get the idea there, RSS feeds and so on. So is there anything else you wanted to say about? We'll be around for a while, so if you try it out and talk to us about how you're moving things around, that'd be great. But otherwise, we'll pause there, and if anyone wants to talk about mobile strategies for apps or anything else, questions, how you did things, please.
Question, how did they go about developing platform-specific apps versus and have you thought about revisiting that to go to an iOS-specific app?
So what we always intended to try to make it an agnostic experience. So we've launched iOS and we've launched Android. And as Peter was mentioning, we're looking at BlackBerry, and we've got a Windows 8 device now and sort of thinking about what that experience might be like there. I don't think there was a time when anyone ever suggested that it'd be any specific platform. I think that never came up. Maybe I didn't understand the question.
The reason I'm asking is like LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. started out with HTML5, jQuery-based apps, and then moved to very specific
Oh, I see.
apps because of performance-related issues. Now your app relatively has that layer of complexity.
Right.
Odds are you never encountered any of those performance-related issues.
Performance is not so much of an issue on the iOS side. Sorry. And on the Android side, however, the performance is worst on tablet devices. On phone devices, it's almost comparable to iOS. So on the other hand, though, we started off this project with a prototype, and we wanted to just demonstrate the ability to launch this on the two devices. And so we choose to do it on hybrid. There's capacity to transform this app into native ones, but a small percentage on our campus is asking for BlackBerry. So I think with 3 platforms, it's defensible to say that we should keep it on a hybrid approach instead of doing all on native apps.
I'm just going to address the question that's coming over the internet. Have your faculties and departments bought into adding their own content into your app? So yes, nobody has protested, that everyone sees, and we are able to demonstrate quickly in prototype how that might look as a starting point. I think the real challenge is that we still have a lot of units who have no content in any kind of responsive way. So if we pulled in their website, they don't have RSS feeds and so on. And this is actually a driver to help them think about the possibilities of making those changes to their websites in general. And that and then we get into a different conversation with them. It's a byproduct of that. So sorry, you had.
Yeah, I just wanted, could you speak about more from an operational point of view, like how long it took and what kind of internal resources you have, how often your strategic comms people meet, like how many bodies does it take up from a day-to-day perspective?
It was from the epiphany to
The process started in November, and we got a group of students together to talk about things, and then the group epiphany sort of started there. I think Avi mostly handled that side of things. On the technical side, the development is on and off through the months of through the months of January to March. And it's probably taking 40% of one developer to handle that. And then it sort of went into a hiatus mode because we were submitting it to the higher ups to have it reviewed. And so it sort of delayed for two months. And then in May, we finally got the approval to do that, to launch it. So Avi can talk about how to get the group together and sort of get them into the consensus mode.
Yeah, it's more, I think we know that. And it takes different lengths of time depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
But going forward, like what kind of, like in terms of, what do you anticipate the maintenance?
So we're very
from a content point of view and.
Right. We're very fortunate in our school to have very active and hourly contact kind of thing with strategic communications and student life. Very much so with Stratcom. We have a number of partnerships around. So the IT shop runs the content management service, and Stratcom is the functional owner of that as well. So if there are any issues or there's a suggestion that comes forward, it's almost instantaneous to bring it to them rather than at the moment on the cycle. And we've been working on those relationships. So I think this is, again, a byproduct of that. So there was...
I'd like to talk about analytics. Are you capturing any analytics? Because I really like that you have this cool approach where people are able to put their app together. And I think from an ROI perspective, if you're able to tell what buttons are more popular or what are people actually doing, versus what's there because somebody had a very vocal voice, I think it helps move the app going forward. So are you capturing that?
Right. We don't capture within the app who's clicking on what button. We don't have a privacy release on that front, so I can't say that we have. It would be obviously useful to have that kind of statistics available. We were playing with Google Analytics and installing the API into the app, but we pulled that out because we weren't confident enough that it would be useful. Well, I can't speak for Avi, but I wasn't confident that it would be useful. So what we're now relying on is basically what Android and iOS, the iTunes Store, iTunes Connect can provide, and Android can provide with us with the basic download information. But so far it's been very early in the process, so we don't have too much data gathered at this point. The first 2 days of launch, I have to say though, we got 1,000 downloads on the iOS side, so it was pretty good on the 2 days. And then it goes into the weekend and it just dropped like that. So launch date might be very important.
So I just saw a question. I have to put on my glasses because I can't read it anymore, but sorry. How much design versus development was involved in the planning phase? I don't know how you quantify that. That's an interesting question. I mean, I think once we had that group epiphany that we try to do this as sort of the mega app, micro app approach, we just sort of handed it off and said, okay, let's see what you can come up with. And I think it's a combination of a technical design and development really was where most of the work went. I think it's fair to say. I saw.
What was involved with your decision to go with PhoneGap rather than one of the other frameworks?
I've tried the Sencha Touch framework, and we've actually launched another app for the university on Sencha Touch. And comparing the jQuery Mobile and Sencha Touch, I think it's much easier to work with jQuery Mobile. Just my personal experience, that is. And there are so much more libraries that we can plug into jQuery Mobile that is compatible with jQuery Mobile versus Sencha Touch. And honestly, Sencha does seem a little bit slower on the Android side too. Hope that answers your question.
Yep.
You have some of the micro apps that you put in that reference other applications installed on the phone. How does your app behave if those other applications aren't installed and a user tries to put them in?
Right. So it will it will show them with a screen that allows them to click on one of the icons to go to the store to download it. So all I need to do is create a screen that will load up if the app is not present. That involves some JavaScript detection there. And then go to the iTunes Store and the Google Play Store, copy the link, and then put in an icon and just pop it there. So it's not that hard. There on the iOS side, what you saw actually, Avi was loading the Blackboard Mobile Learn. That screen actually came up. So, but it sort of pops up. It shouldn't have popped up because the Blackboard Mobile Learn app did launch. And that was one of the iOS bug that we have to fix at this point.